All right, today we're cracking open a case file, and it's a really old one. Thousands of years old, in fact. We're launching an investigation into this entity that keeps popping up throughout history under all sorts of different names, and in all these different cultures. So let's follow the evidence and see where it takes us.
So let's start with a question that honestly sounds like it's from a scary movie, but according to the material we're looking at, this isn't fiction. The idea is that we can actually follow the trail of evidence, trace the influence of this incredibly powerful and pretty malevolent force, starting way back in ancient history and following it all the way to our world today.
You know, the first big break in this case didn't come from some dusty old library scroll. Nope, it came right out of the ground. Back in 1928, in this ancient city called Ugarit, which is in modern-day Syria, archaeologists dug up a whole bunch of clay tablets. And these things, they weren't just broken pottery. They were basically the first detailed case files on our subject, giving us our first real profile. And it was on those tablets that investigators got their first clear picture of this entity, this Baal. For the very first time, all the stories, the details about his powers, his whole domain, it was all laid out.
So who exactly was Baal? Well, according to those ancient texts, he was a real powerhouse. I mean, think about it. He was the god of storms and rain. That meant he controlled whether the crops grew or failed. His whole story, this cycle of death and rebirth, was tied directly to the seasons. In a world that lived and died by its harvest, having power over the rain, that's basically the power over life and death itself.
But here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at Baal's profile, you start seeing these uncanny similarities to gods from all over the ancient world. A powerful god of the sky, thunder, and rain sounds a lot like Zeus in Greece, or Thor for the Norse, or even Indra in Hinduism. And a god of fertility and the cycle of life and death, well, that's got echoes of Osiris in Egypt. The source material we're looking at basically argues this is no coincidence. It suggests we're looking at the same entity, just showing up in different cultures with different aliases.
Okay, so we have a profile of our subject. Now the investigation has to look at the methods, the rituals, the MO, if you will, of Baal's followers. And I have to warn you, this is where the case takes a really, really dark turn.
The sources describe something just absolutely chilling. Apparently, the Canaanites had these huge, hollow metal statues of Baal. They would heat them from the inside until the whole thing was glowing red hot. And then they would sacrifice their firstborn child by placing them in the idol's burning hot arms. To drown out the unimaginable sounds, priests would beat drums like crazy. And this was seen as the highest form of devotion.
And this is just a world away from what you see in the Abrahamic traditions, right? I mean, take the story of the prophet Abraham. He's tested by being asked to sacrifice his son, but at the very last second, God provides a ram to take his place. The message here, at least according to sources, is crystal clear. The one God provides a way to save life, while these other gods, like Baal, demand it. So, with a conflict this fundamental, it was never going to just stay an idea on paper. And that brings our investigation to the first major confrontation. A direct, public challenge to Baal's power, thrown down by the prophets of the one God. The whole thing goes down on a place called Mount Carmel. At this point in history, the kingdom of Israel, under King Ahab and his queen, Jezebel, has gone all in on Baal worship. They even built this huge temple for him. So the prophet Elijah decides, all right, that's enough. It's time for a public showdown to settle, once and for all, whose God is the real deal. And you have to understand, the odds were just insane. You've got 800 priests of Baal, plus all their followers, on one side. And on the other, just one guy, the prophet Elijah. The challenge itself was pretty straightforward. Each side builds an altar, prepares a sacrifice, and the God that sends down fire from heaven to consume it, well, that's the true God.
So the priests of Baal, they go first. They prayed, they chanted, they even started cutting themselves for hours and nothing. Not a spark. Their altar was just cold stone. Then it's Elijah's turn. He prepares his altar, and just to make it even crazier, he has it soaked with water. Then, with just one prayer, bam! Fire shoots down from heaven and completely vaporizes everything. Not just the sacrifice, but the wood, the stones, even the water in the ditch around it. It was a total public smackdown for the cult of Baal.
But look, just because you get defeated in public, that doesn't mean you're gone for good. Our subject just went underground. It changed its name, laid low for a while, and then re-emerged centuries later in a totally new, really powerful spot, the Arabian Peninsula. The story goes like this. There was this well-respected tribal leader, a guy named Amr bin Luhai. He traveled to Syria, supposedly for some medical treatment. While he was there, he saw people worshipping idols and he was impressed. So he asked if he could take one back home to Arabia, thinking it would bring them rain, help them win battles. And the idol he brought back? The sources claim it was just another face of Baal.
So this idol gets taken all the way to Mecca and placed right inside the Kaaba, the most sacred spot in all of Arabia. And it gets a new name, Hubal. Before long, Hubal becomes the main god among hundreds of other idols that the Arab tribes were worshipping. The original faith of Abraham, that belief in one God, had been almost totally wiped out and replaced.
And that practice of sacrifice, it didn't go away. This quote here is from Abdul Muttalib, who was the grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad. He actually made a vow that if he was blessed with 10 sons, he'd sacrifice one of them to Hubal. Well, he got his 10 sons, and when they drew lots to see who it would be, the name that kept coming up was his youngest, Abdullah, who would go on to be the Prophet's father. The way the narrative is framed in our source is that this was Baal, in his new disguise as Hubal, trying to stop the final prophet from ever being born. In the end, Abdullah was saved, but it took a ransom of 100 camels.
Now, this part of the investigation, it ends with a bang, because when the Prophet Muhammad finally returned to Mecca as a victor, he walked right into the Kaaba and personally smashed Hubal, along with all the other 360-something idols in there. He cleansed the whole place, restoring it to the worship of the one true God.
So all the public idols are smashed. You'd think, okay, case closed, the trail's gone cold. But that's not what the source material argues at all. It suggests the exact opposite, that the worship didn't die, it just mutated. It went deeper underground, got more secretive, and started weaving itself into the very fabric of power in the world we live in now.
So this timeline here kind of lays out the alleged path. You see, it starts with open worship in ancient Canaan. Then it moves to direct confrontation with the prophets. Then it gets a new identity as Hubal in Mecca. But after those idols were all destroyed, the claim is the cult just slipped into the shadows. From there, it supposedly fueled the secret satanic cults you hear about from the Middle Ages, and, eventually, the powerful secret societies that exist today.
And the trail, according to these sources, leads to some pretty wild places today. We're talking about secretive gatherings of the super elite, like the Bohemian Club, where powerful people allegedly perform these strange rituals in front of a giant 40-foot owl statue. The source is also connected to the symbols used by groups like the Church of Satan. And then there's the really big claim that super influential secret societies, you know the names, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, are the modern-day vehicles for this ancient worship, even embedding its symbols into huge public events and ceremonies we all watch.
Which brings us to the ultimate conclusion of the source material. This whole thing, this thread that stretches from a Canaanite idol thousands of years ago all the way to modern secret societies, it isn't just a bunch of random disconnected history. It's presented as one single, long-running, and incredibly successful deception orchestrated by the ultimate evil, who in Islam is known as Iblis, or Satan.
So, there you have it. The evidence trail in this case file has taken us from a dusty archaeological dig in Syria all the way to the alleged corridors of power in our own time. Which leaves us with the final question. Is Baal just an ancient myth, a historical footnote? Or, as the material we've looked at argues so passionately, is this cold case not cold at all? Is it an active investigation into a hidden power that never went away? It just got better at hiding? The file is open.